Welcome back to Where Swans Walk. We have one question which we're going to be discussing on this week's episode. Who is responsible for this slow start to the season? Many fans are blaming Williams. Other fans are blaming the board. Who do you blame? Well, we've got 4 Swans all lined up. Happy, most are, to talk about who they blame on Where Swans Walk. Welcome. Oh, yes, 4 very smiling, happy faces. Welcome back, James, Rich, and Hugh. And we're not talking to Jimmy because he managed to get Oasis tickets when none of the rest of us did. Well, Jimmy, how did you manage that, by the way, just out of interest?
My mate actually had a pre-sale code and he needed 2 tickets, so I sent him the money and he got me the other 2.
Okay, we'll put your hate in the comments below for James. Congratulations. If you want to sell them, then you as well? Oh my God! Right, okay. Let's
opening night.
We'll get rid of both of you. Right. Welcome then to where the Swans walk. I'm just going to throw this as an open question to you all. I'm confused. Okay, I watch as much Swansea as I possibly can, not as much as you. I read the comments. I look at the forums, and it seems to be a split of fans at the moment. Half are saying Williams doesn't know what he's doing, he's getting it all wrong. The other half are saying, how's he expected to deal with what he's got, with what he was given in recruitment? So, Richard, start the ball rolling on this debate for us. Where do you stand?
Well, it's one of those, I think he knows what he's doing, for one. He's certainly got a plan. It's just finding the right pieces to make the plan work at times. And as I've said for weeks, really, we haven't really got a big squad. We needed to get further additions in. We didn't really do that last week. So I'm kind of a little bit worried with the depth of the squad, and the lack of creative players is really concerning. But on hindsight, you look at some of the players that have come in. Is it a case of, do they need a little bit more time and up their fitness levels? Maybe the international break might be a blessing in disguise, apart from our Koreans going off for 2 weeks. But it's a case of gelling, like a lot of the teams. It's early days in the Championship.
The West Brom fans were the same as the Middlesbrough fans, who said, actually, the second half, Swansea were all right. You played decent stuff for 45 minutes, but the first 45 minutes, you were garbage. Is there an issue? Is there an issue here with how we start games, Hugh? Is it how he sets them up tactically from the off? What's the issue?
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a pattern. If you look at the Middlesbrough game, we were absolutely terrible first half, and second half we started to play. It seems like it was the same on Saturday, although I haven't seen much of Saturday. But it was probably the reverse of the Cardiff game, though, to be fair. We dominated first half, should have been out of sight at half-time, and then second half we were woeful. I like Williams. I think he's got some of the substitutions wrong on occasions. I think we need to give him a chance. But, I think some of his decisions have been a bit surprising and confusing.
Jimmy, where do you stand on it?
I think, I wouldn't necessarily blame Williams entirely. Again, we have started slow. I mean, I was at West Brom on Saturday, and the first half it could have been 4-5-0. They could have been completely out of sight. But then, as I said, you bring it to the second half, some decent chances. I think we had a Stonewall penalty not given for us. Eon got wiped out by their goalkeeper, nothing given for that, which was unbelievable. I can't believe he didn't give that one. But I think, a bit more luck in our way. We probably draw that game 1-1, even despite the awful first half. But you could also argue, I suppose, we could have lost 4-0. But I think with the players he's got in, I think, there's with Ollie Cooper playing up front for the most of the second half yesterday, it surely shows you that maybe there was more work to be done in the transfer window in attacking areas.
Okay. We'll look at some tweets in a second. I've left you to last, James, because I sense that you're ready to burst here. So go on. We'll let you have your therapy session. Who's to blame?
It's a mix of things. Williams isn't blameless at the moment. He has made some questionable decisions this season, substitution wise, and the way we started games. But every single season since the Americans have been here. We come out of a transfer window and there's always one vital piece of the puzzle missing. No more so than the last 2 or 3 seasons, right? We've played an entire season under Russell Martin without a right back. He had literally no depth on the bench. And since the new investors have come in, one name, Paul Watson for me, come in as this so-called recruitment expert that we've got. There's overseen 3 questionable wins, one which was an absolute disaster. And I say you got to start looking at the patterns and looking at who's calling the shots from the beginning. And like James just said there now, the fact that we've just come off transfer deadline day, we have 2 fit strikers at the club, and we finished the game play with Ollie Cooper playing up front. It just says it all to me. That again, we have not learned our lessons, and we are just going round and round in circles where we will constantly come out of a window, and the one thing that needs addressing, we will always just let it fly by.
Rossi said in a tweet, Paul Watson needs investigating. I promise you, these players he's brought in wouldn't make Britain Rovers reserve side. Please, somebody save me from this communist regime that I am being treated to. I mean, it's funny, but it's not. But do you get, James, the point that he's making there? I think he's echoing shades of what you were saying.
I think you have to be very careful with what you're saying there. Again, but the fact that we have had 3 windows where there are just really amateur mistakes being made, someone has to answer for it. Somebody has to answer it. And like I said, it isn't just him. It is the managers that have been here. It is the recruitment team that's working underneath him as well. But there's a lack of accountability. I go back to one of the fan forums that I went to, and a lot of questions were directed at Paul Watson. Do you know who answered those questions? The chairman. The chairman stood up and answered every question for him. He did not answer or take accountability. And for me, I think that just says a lot about the way that we run. Like I said, it's not all down to one person. I just do feel like sometimes a lot of people get by without the criticism and don't have to be accountable to it.
Okay. Rich, let's have a look at the spending then of all the clubs, and let's just compute exactly where West Swansea are. 14th, smack bang in the middle there. You spent more than, I suppose, the teams below you would expect to. €5 million spent, 3.5 of that recouped. So overall, you know, the balance, the books are well balanced, aren't they? So on one hand, can you understand, well, if the money isn't there to be spent, then you can't really spend it because you don't want to end up doing a Luton, you don't want to end up doing a Sunderland, a Coventry. Is there an element where you look at this and go, well, yeah, it's been nice to do this stuff, but the club just can't? They haven't got the spending power of Leeds and Burnley and other teams that have been recently relegated.
Yeah, and I understand the model they go for, really, as such. And the last few years have been a case of, you know, we know there's a £10 million deficit to be made every season. That's a common knowledge, a fact on there. Someone has to go in, someone has to go leave the club, a big player of sorts, before you can even start thinking about reinvesting. So it's one of those cases, would you rather your club spend without their means, or would you rather kind of go for bust, I guess? Or would you rather be kind of breaking even and playing through the way we are now, as trying to bring the players through the academy? But then the problem with that is, when you don't have one of those players to sell, what do you do then? And you're rushing through some players, and then all of a sudden you're in the scenario we're at now, where we've blooded all our youngsters in, then no one else ready to come through. So it's a bit, you have to still put a little bit into the pot as well. So we need some investment, I think.
Thanks for that, Rich. It's a good point that you make. Hugh, let's have a look at the players you have brought in then, if that's okay, and where the money has been spent. And let's look at the quality so far. I know we haven't seen all of these. I did see a criticism of Vipotnik, which we'll have a look at in a minute. Who for you has shone, and based on what you've seen so far, have they spent well in terms of quality needed?
For me, it's got to be Franco that's shone. by head and shoulders above anyone else on that list by an absolute country mile. I think the bloke's class. He's what we've been looking for since we lost Flynn Downs. He's been absolutely superb. In terms of the money, 2.38 million on Bianchini at the moment seems mental from what I've seen. He was appalling against Wickham last week. He was a bench player for a second division French team before that, so to spend 2.5 million nearly on that seems crazy. Obviously, it's early days on him and a few of the others, so prepared to give him a chance, but it's not looking hopeful. I think for Potnick, I think some of the criticism has been harsh of him. I think he's lacking a bit of fitness. I think if that comes, I think he'll be all right. I think he'll get a few goals. And then some of the others like Miles, Bert Harris, he's only been with us for Saturday, and Abbey again only played against Wickham, so still the jury's out on a few of them, but doesn't look brilliant business.
Okay. Before I ask you all to give me a grading on this, we've got to look at the departures as well. Jimmy, I'll come to you on this one. As the others have pointed out, there isn't too much here in terms of recruitment and big transfer fees like other clubs have been able to do. We'll talk perhaps more about the academy situation maybe next week. But are there any players on here which you look at and go, oh, I wish the club might have done a better deal with, improved their terms, done a bit more to keep? Or do you look down that list and say, actually, I'm not bothered about any of those names not being here?
I can't lie with most of them. I'm not really bothered that they've gone. I think the thing I'm more worried about is that we had an offer for about £13 million for Nathan Wood last year. We turned it down. We sold it for £3.5 million. Less than a year later, I think it's ridiculous. He was a great player at the time, but we had backup for him anyway. I think not to take that fee was absolutely mind-boggling because he was never, personally, I don't think he was never that good to warrant that fee. So I think the fact we didn't take it was absolutely mental at the time. I think with the other ones, Ogbeta was never going to get any money for him. Walsh is way too injury-prone. Yates was a disaster signing. Same with Kukurevich. Congreve and Thomas are both going out on loan for experience. They'll be back next season, so that's good for them. And Pochetta may be the only one I would have considered at the time purely because of our lack of winger depth. He seemed all right. He struggles with his end product, but the wingers we have now also have the same issue, I think. So I don't think it would have hurt to keep him, and he looked all right for Oxford. But apart from that, I don't think there's anyone on there that's particularly massive loss.
Anyone there for you, James?
I think Plaheta for me would probably been the one that I would have kept. If you're looking at, we spent 2.3 million euros allegedly on a winger that was on the bench for Bastia. I think I would have rather have kept Plaheta, if I'm being really honest.
So that leaves me with one final question before we wrap up your transfer window. Grade out of 10 for us. Rich, you get the first go on this.
A 6, a generous 6, I think, and that's purely because I think a couple of main guys we brought in are really good, solid signings, but there's just not enough of them.
Hugh?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think Rich is pretty spot on. Maybe a 5 if I'm being a bit more pessimistic. A few of them could push it up to a 6 or 7, depending on how they turn out. But I think Franco is pushing that number up on his own.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think especially Franco. I think Franco on his own could bump it up to a 6 or 7 in future. He's been unbelievable. But I think if Vigouroux seems like a solid signing, we need a decent keeper permanently, so that's good. Yom looks like a decent talent. He'll take a while to get used to it, but I think he'll be all right after that. Same with Vipotnik. But I think 6 is probably about right because I just think there was more to be done. But I don't think the players we brought in were necessarily poor signings. I think we needed more.
Okay. James?
I'm going to go with a 4 because 14 out and 7 in tells its own story. And purely just this is not to knock the players that we brought in, but the way in which we operate. Like I said, there is definitely potential there. The guys have said it themselves. Franco, Yom look fantastic players, but it's just the fact that we are so thin on the ground at the moment. It just seems that we never seem to learn our lesson, and it's jading at the moment.
Okay. The odds on Swansea being relegated have been halved this week. Do you think that's harsh, given that you've played Middlesbrough and West Brom away, who are both likely to be in the playoff discussions? You've had a derby at home, which is, arguably it could go anyway, and you won your other game. why are we? What are we seeing? What are others seeing that the five of us aren't? Is it? I've seen the word relegation being put into some Swansea fans' tweets suggesting this. We don't sort out. This is where we're heading. Rich, there's no danger Swansea are going to be dragged into a dogfight this season, is there?
Well, it's a case sometimes of, you just got to look at the next game in front of you, and it's very early days in the Championship. Everyone will take points off each other through the season, and the next three games are looked at. They're all three teams, are all round us on the same points roughly in the league. Norwich, Bristol City, and there's someone else as well. But the case of, you win one game, all of a sudden you're back in the top half again. So I don't think anyone will be flying away with this league this year. Looking at what we've seen so far, all the teams have been very beatable, and some of the big teams which you expect to be doing better have dropped points because they're changing their teams around. So we shall see. I think get about halfway through the season now, then you can start looking at who's going to be there and who's going to be down the bottom, I think.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's look at one more, or a couple more tweets. Hugh Richard says this was Russell Martin Mark II. Might as well play Grimes as a sweeper in the back three. Put two in midfield and two up front. Let me just check. Where's my other one? I had. There we are. 2 minutes ago, we're passing it around at the back. Zanzipopnik looks like another Jerry Yates. What's your view on the two in midfield and two up front suggestion?
I'm open to anything at this point. Trouble is, we're so thin on the ground. I don't think we can afford to play two strikers at the same time. Yeah, I mean, I get the Grimes thing. I mean, he's probably divided this fan base more than any other player in recent memory. I think he's a brilliant player, but I think he's too far back half the time. You look at his statistics for passes that actually split defences and are forward passes to create chances, and he's really high, but he just doesn't get forward enough to do it. And I think part of that's just the way the team's set up. It's not his fault. So I get the frustration on that. I think we need to push him up further the field, but we're massively lacking a creative midfielder as well. Ollie Cooper, isn't it? And we haven't signed somebody in that position.
Jimmy, Norwich then next, as Rich mentioned. There's not been a 0-0 in this fixture since 1964, so we know it's guaranteed goals. You won there, or you won against them last season, October. What needs to change, though, from the starting 11 for the team that you watched at West Brom in the first half?
To be honest, I don't think much necessarily needs to change. I don't necessarily think it's the personnel in the team. I think, as I said, with the games we've had so far, I think it's quite a big overreaction to some of the results. Like, yes, we lost to Middlesbrough and West Brom, but they're both going to be pushing the playoffs. Cardiff was always going to be tough. So, as you said, we beat Preston, so I think there's no need for everyone with the tweets, Williams out. I think it's an absolute mental reaction to some games where we probably would have said at the start of the season we weren't going to win anyway. So I think all we have to do is just make sure we start strong, as you said, with Borough and West Brom. It was just an awful first half, but the second half we were actually okay, probably the better team in both of them games. So I think just get quick starting, start off the front foot, try and get an early goal, and then rather than sitting off like we did against Cardiff, just keep going and going like we did against Preston. And I think it could be all right in a while. Just need to get these new players set in and just get going.
Okay. James, 5 games then in the next block for the next international break. What's the minimum point expectation of those 5 games?
I think we need to get at least 6 or 7. For me, like anything less than that, and then I'm starting to worry. I'm looking at it's a tough run, and hopefully these 2 weeks will mean that we can go back to the drawing board, let a few of the other guys bed in, and hopefully we'll just be looking back at this as a little blip at the start of the season. But a minimum, like I said, 6 or 7 points for me.
Okay. All right. When we come back after the international break, we'll be asking and reviewing about left backs and right backs at Swansea. Who's the best ever left back and right back we've ever seen? And we're also asking about your worst ever away trips as well. So lots to talk about. We'll also review the Norwich game as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we let you go, it is international break, and you've got a new man in charge of the Welsh side. Jimmy, first, was it true that the Swansea fans brought Spanish flags to to the Hawthorns. I was reading West Brom fans saying it's pathetic to see Spanish flags being flown in the away end. Is that true?
I didn't see any. I can't say I was actively looking for Spain flags, mine, but I didn't see any. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, we did it the old time with the France flags after the World Cup and the Italy flags after the Euro. So I wouldn't have been surprised in the slightest if we did.
Rich, what are you hoping for from Mr. Bellamy?
Well, an improvement from Rob Page, really, at the end of the day. It went so bad at the end. I think it's just a different sort of regime now, different sort of attitude, and a good performance against Turkey would really get things off to a good start if we can get three points in that one.
And just generally, with it being Craig Bellamy, you can all put your Swansea glasses to one side, can you, and fully get behind him?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a passionate Welshman. That's all we need. It's good enough for me. I don't care who he played for. He's retired. Doesn't play for him now.
Taking out club bias out of international football. No point holding the agenda because he's ex-Cardiff. Just let it see what he does. Hold him to account if he's poor, but not because he's Cardiff. It's just it depends on the results, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the Welsh games.
Anyone who can give us a bit of. So anyone who can just restore a bit of excitement around the international scene, because we have been lacking it for a while. So hopefully Bellamy can bring that back.
Right, enjoy that. Enjoy the Norwich games. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you all.